Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the National Parents Union presents Speak Your Truth with yours truly, Vivett Dukes. It's wonderful to be here tonight. I'd like to start off our show first and foremost tonight, thanking the National Parents Union for awarding Speak Your Truth um, a grant. We applied for a grant through the homeschooling opportunity that they put out a few weeks ago, and we found out last week that we were one of, I think there were 13 recipients who collectively received $200,000. So Speak Your Truth will be sharing more. We created a resource and streaming services and support, educational support for families who have chosen to homeschool their children for a variety of reasons, but in large part specifically families who, as a result of everything going on with COVID-19 and the global coronavirus pandemic that we are currently in, they've chosen to educate their children at home. And we thought it was very important here at Speak Your Truth to make sure that they had not only resources, but culturally relevant and sustaining resources where they can speak to the very essence of their children, look back at our history, looking at back at the history of Black people, of Indigenous people, of people of color in general, where so much of our contributions and history, both domestically and globally, are null and void where curriculum are concerned, and definitely not present as much as they need to be in our traditional models of schooling. So thank you to the National Parents Union for believing in our mission, for hearing our hearts as we wrote that curriculum. And I'd also like to thank it. I was heavily inspired by Beyonce Knowles Carter's video album, Black is King. And it was really the impetus for me to write this curriculum. And I'm just really grateful for it in so many ways. And just thank you. I'm really happy. So on behalf of Speak Your Truth, thank you so much. And as we're talking about homeschooling, we have a guest this evening who's really going to be quite transparent to talk about her and her partner's experiences with homeschooling, their own child. They have two children, one of which is of school age, is attending school. So they're very much in the thick of things. And it's important that we hear the perspective of families, a variety of families. Our definition of families has definitely evolved over the course of time. And at this current time in history, how we define family has broadened so much. And the decisions that families have to make in this time are quite different than any other time in history, specifically where their children's educational needs are concerned. Before I go any further, I do want to take a time during this broadcast to acknowledge Breonna Taylor. If you notice, you'll see the cover of O Magazine for this month features Breonna Taylor. And I have not spoken too publicly about Breonna Taylor because she hits very close to home. She and my youngest daughter actually share the same month and day of birth, June 5th. And so that made it very personal to me because although at different years, her mother and I were giving birth on the same day. And, you know, just to think as we're talking about our children and how important our children are to us, to think of your child laying in bed and being riddled by gunshots in her sleep, and just laying there dead, and no justice has been served. The officers who killed her are still working, are still in their positions, have not been brought to justice, have not been arrested, have not been charged. No charges have been filed at all in the Breonna Taylor murder case, because that's what it is. And so I would be remiss if I did not just take a moment out of this broadcast to pay homage to her, to send out lots of love to her mother and her family. I cannot imagine what you are going through, and I pray to God I never have to experience that none of us ever have to experience that. And so I just don't want us to ever lose sight of our fight, lose sight of why we're fighting, lose sight of why we are in this mission, lose sight of why it is so important for parents to band together to protect, to serve the needs of our children. Because if we don't do it, no one else is going to. So with that, I'd like to bring on a mama bear who protects her children, who loves on her children, and who is very concerned about her eldest child in particular's education as it stands right now. Rachel Figueroa-Smith, thank you so much for being here tonight. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me, Viv.
You're quite welcome. Could you introduce yourself to, like, I could introduce you, but you're so much more to me than, so quick story, Rachel's husband and I actually met online, just reading. He read some things that I wrote, and we actually formed a friendship from that time. And we ended up going to a rally in Washington, D.C. together to fight for the rights of incarcerated men, women, and children. And since then, Rachel and I have developed a really beautiful friendship. Our families, John is involved. Like, we've just grown so much. And I just love you so much, and I'm so happy you're here. But outside of that, what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my name's Rachel. What brings me here tonight is my 5-year-old daughter. I have, or in a month, 5-year-old, and my 8-month-old son, but much more my daughter. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called Repair the World. So my job is engaging people in volunteer work, primarily in central Brooklyn, also some in Harlem. But that is very relevant to this conversation also, I would say, for a lot of reasons, but particularly because over the last 6 months, I've been an essential worker. I've been helping to staff food kitchens and running a pantry out of our workshop, our office space, and been talking to educators through Central Brooklyn about things like how Wi-Fi doesn't function and what the impact of that is on students. But I live in Long Island, and as Viv said, I got to know her over the last, I think we're looking at 3 years. Yep.
This,
Um,
this month, actually, it was August
yeah.
that we actually like met up. So yep, 3 years.
Yeah. Which is pretty, yeah. So so my husband is an early childhood music teacher. He's been working from teaching classes remotely since March. I work in person 2 days a week, typically, and remotely the rest of the week. And we should be having a kid entering kindergarten in public schools, but that is not what's happening here. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I worked in public schools for a long time myself as well in the New York City school system. And really, I think of myself as an educator and approach issues, I think, very much as an educator and big picture problem solver.
Absolutely, because in the realm of education, we have our administrators and our teachers, but we also have the staff that come in to do the after school program and who provide counseling. And they're really a wide gamut of support staff who go unsung, who we don't really think about in the realm of the school space or who helps to educate our children, but they're vital. They're vital, you know. So I do consider you to be an educator too. And I'm curious about what are your plans going to be for your daughter?
So we have made the decision. I'll also start by saying the plan where we live is to send kids to school, kindergarten age children to school 5 days a week for full days. In our district, it's 14 to 15 students in a classroom, with all children's desks facing the same direction. There's been talk of whether the teacher might teach from the back of the room to avoid cross-contamination, but I don't know where that's landed. We're not sending our daughter to school for a lot of reasons, but I would say that that plan that I just described there does not sound like anything that can or will be followed. And so I don't know what actually will go on that would possibly keep her safe in the building. In my perspective, kindergarten is as much about skill development as it is about social development. And the social development that is being, that our kids are being set up to engage in is non-existent. So we are going to be homeschooling. We are homeschooling along with a friend of ours who has a child the same age and are interested in other kids who might want to join, but keeping it to no more than 5 kids. And we're doing it co-op style. So my husband will be teaching at least 2 days a week, and we're kind of picking up and deciding as we go who else will teach. In a lot of ways, it's amazing because we get to do all of the anti-racist and equity-based curriculum and really follow our kids' interests in ways that small group settings don't allow for public schools to do. And it is not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination, and is not what I think, it's not equitable for anybody that's involved in this. So that is very much on my mind as a parent. And like, I am aware of the deep privilege involved in being able to make this decision and how many other parents don't have that.
Yes. Just in listening to the plan that your district has set out for the school, the educator in me is saying, well, how can small children, their first time really in this type of school setting, learn if the teacher is in the back of the room? As I was telling you, as we were preparing for the show, my daughter, she's 21 years old, and I were out today. And as I had on the mask, I said to her, I don't really know how this is going to work when I'm in the classroom because the kids can't see my mouth. And so that's a big part of my, you know, our interaction. That's part of how they are learning, you know, if they're really auditory learners. It's very difficult to engage with your teacher with a mask over her mouth. And so sitting in the back of the classroom just doesn't make sense because the kids are naturally going to just turn around to look at the teacher. It's instinctive,
Yep.
you know, so I don't understand how that's going to work. And 15 small children in a classroom. I mean, I don't know how big the classroom sizes are or what algorithm they use to come up with that, but it does seem like too many kids in one space. For older kids, we've been told 8 to 10, depending on the size, but even in schools that have fairly large, like gymnasiums and auditoriums, maybe you can get 14, 15, 16 kids, but that's a really, when you think about, you know, a typical like gymnasium in a school, it's a lot. So I hear your concerns with that, and I echo them because that is concerning, you know. It is concerning.
Yeah. My hope, I mean, I know a lot of parents near us are sending their kids in with a lot of reluctance. I don't know anybody who's sending their kids in with like full faith in the school.
Hey, let's go to school.
Yeah. I'm sure they exist, because if they didn't exist, then Long Island wouldn't be moving ahead at the pace we are, I think.
Mhm.
But, and our school principal, frankly, is one of them. He's told me a few times that he's very excited that they're opening and wishes they had opened back up earlier, and that so the littlest kids are in this full day schedule, but older kids are in hybrid, and he's let me know that he doesn't think that's the best for anybody. I don't think that's the best for anybody either, but yeah, I don't think the plan is realistic. I asked a few ways if they would be able to like set up outdoor classrooms. Maybe that's the plan, but I don't think so. They're also sharing all of their specialists. So the science teachers going room to room, the gym teachers going room to room, etc. So like any effort that is successful in containing any virus will then be destroyed through those specialists moving.
Right. Being spread. So how are you managing homeschooling, because you've never done this before? So what steps have you taken, or how have you, I know you and I have been talking about like just joining certain groups
Yeah.
online and seeing how you can like kind of learn more about this. It's a whole nother undertaking.
Yeah. We're planning to use the literacy curriculum that we know our district uses for kindergarten. So we're buying 3 like individual class sets, individual student sets of their curriculum for our 3 kids and a teacher guide. We're using Black Lives Matter in school content to guide the like book selection. And like frankly, that's as far as we've gotten. And that's not, and like that's not enough. And also it's kind of fascinating to see what how homeschool parents do this, because some of them only spend like half an hour a day schooling. My daughter was home from March till now. And we certainly didn't have to be doing school through this whole summer, but she needed some structure. We didn't send her to camp. And in this 6-month period, she has learned to read. Like in March, she didn't know how to read. Now she can read. She's learned to ride a bike. She's learned to use a vacuum in our house. So like, I feel relatively confident that we can find a rounded way to be teaching skills. Half an hour to me isn't like, as an educator, is not at all enough. We're talking about a 3.5-hour day with the kids all together, and then a 1 hour like something with me or daddy or my mom each afternoon, which still feels short, but is probably comparable to the amount of teaching time in a school day for little ones.
Absolutely. And I think the most important thing really is structure, as you mentioned, like having a steady structure, because that's what becomes difficult when a child, just think about over the summer, even as an adult, I've already saying like, oh, I have to start going to bed at my usual bedtime again and trying to retrain myself because I will have to wake up earlier now to get, back on track. So
Yeah.
if I have to do that, if we have to do that as adults, imagine children. If they go for too long of a time without the structure, then it becomes they can become oppositional when you try to reintroduce that structure. The other thing is that I like to tell parents, and just think about the strengths that you do have and what you do know how to do, and find a way to teach it to your child. I think we don't give enough credit to parents for what they do know how to do. So, Rachel, I know you're of the Jewish faith. If there are certain foods that you want your daughter to learn how to make as a part of your culture and your religion, then do it. If, like you said, she learned to ride a bicycle, that's not something she would have learned in school. So there's value that you can add to your child during this time. If it means going to Michael's and getting an easel and some paint and some boards and just having them create and learning primary colors, like basic things, I think it would really help a lot. But I do believe parents need encouragement,
Yeah.
because the ones I've spoken to, they do feel a little bit ill-equipped, like, well, I'm not a teacher, But a survey the National Parents Union did just about a month ago said that about 46% of parents really feel like, yeah, I can do this.
Yep.
I can do this. So I think that's a high number, almost half.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible to see the shift in parents' understanding of what of what's possible. Even just like we're considering whether we want to try to engage in virtual school for part of our time. It would be nice if our school district had any idea what that would look like so we can make a decision, but they don't. And that's the case everywhere from what I know, which is a huge problem because we're 2 weeks, and I'm not looking at a calendar, 2 weeks, 3 weeks out from school.
We
And
are.
so even if,
What's your start date? I am looking at a calendar actually. What's your start
I
date?
think it's the 8th, September 8th.
September 8th. Yeah. And we're at September 24th. I mean, at August 24th. So next week, 1 week, and then, yeah, 2 weeks
2 weeks and a day, right?
in a day. Yep.
Right. So if theoretically, I know from teachers out here, they don't know what's going on either. So what that means is for all of the parents, and there are many of them who have made the choice to keep their kid in virtual school, they're going to have teachers who have no idea, who are learning at most, let's say they learn tomorrow what the plan is, who at most have 2 weeks to prep.
So no training took place, no professional development over the summer to prepare for hybrid. What does that look like? How are we going to engage the students? We learned some things between March and June. Let's capitalize on that and make this a better experience. No,
Not that I know of. Did you get any training as a teacher?
not that was mandated to be by the school or the DOE. Anything I did was on my own and with a collective of teachers who are like, listen, we know what we need to do. So we've worked the whole summer.
Right.
I've taken like to brush up on my Google.
Yep.
Me training Zoom. I learned so many new features that it can do. The breakout rooms, kids can annotate online. You can like features that I didn't know about.
Yep.
But that was me and, like I said, a group of teachers like, okay, well, we've been teaching long enough to know what we have to do, to know anytime there's a shift, we have to be ahead of that curve because students and parents are relying on us.
Yeah.
You know?
It's, I know I'm thinking so much about the families who I know who are needing to rely on virtual schooling because, like you and I were talking about, parent two parent full-time working household. Like in some ways my family is set up to be able to make this work, and in some ways we're making enormous financial and other sacrifices. Like Stephen would in any other year be working 5 days a week, but that's not going to be possible. Always Stephen would be working a shorter day, so that makes this a bit more manageable, but not like this. Like we are taking a financial cut that is somewhat due to COVID, because how many preschools want virtual music? Not as many.
Right.
But we're able to make this work. A lot of parents I know are not sending their kids in because they live with a grandparent, or like my brother is not in New York, but my brother's daughter is highly immunocompromised, so they can't send their son to school, and he has major learning needs, so he's going to need to do homeschool. They're planning on virtual homeschooling, but the virtual homeschooling is inadequate, especially if they don't have parents who can sit on them and show them how to do it and support them through it the whole way. I know one family where in this town where I live is sending her kids to live with her grandparents in Maine for the semester. That's as far as they've gotten so far for the semester, because she needs them to be supervised during the day. So like the kind of family separation that we talk about on a national level is very much on my mind when we think about all of this, because I can't really even fathom that, needing to send my kid away to be able to engage in virtual learning, but that is the reality for so many families.
I went to my doctor last week, and one of my doctors, and she was saying to me, that's the question on everyone's mind, especially knowing that I am a teacher. Like, how are you doing? What are you going to do? And she said to me, I am not sending, my husband and I decided not to send our daughter back to school because my elderly mom lives with us. And, that would compromise her. And I just can't risk that.
Right.
And I am a trained medical professional. And even I really don't engage with my mom so much because I just don't want her to get sick. And I could see the angst in her face and how hard that is for her, but that's the sacrifice that she's making. And I think about, I'm always concerned with incarceration, families impacted by incarceration. So a lot of families are set up when a loved one, let's say a mother or father, becomes incarcerated. It is their mother or father, usually a mom, who steps in to fill in the gap. So now grandma is taking care of grandchildren. Okay,
Yep.
so how does this work now when kids are going into school environment, but then coming home to grandma? Grandma is really holding it down for everyone, for the family member who's incarcerated, for the children left back at home. If something happens to grandma, that is detrimental in major ways. And so we have families that are blended families, just like what, for the same reasons you just said, for childcare. I am a product of a home like that. My grandmother came from Jamaica because both my parents were working, right, pursuing the American dream. But my parents were adamant about not sending us into daycare because as first generation Americans, that just wasn't something they knew. Like, you're sending your kids to strangers to watch them. That's weird. We don't do that, And so my grandma, my Mimi, rest in peace, she took care of us. I don't know what a babysitter is. I never in my life, because grandma sacrificed her life and came to live with us. So I put myself in that position now. So what if I'm the kid who is going to school, right? Or had to make the decision as the parent? How do you do that?
Right. And like our kids feel it. That's the other thing here. So like my daughter is not yet 5. I brought her with me to work today because of the work juggle that we're in. And there were 3 other people in our space. It's certainly large enough for her to take her mask off and eat at the table. But it took her like a full 3 minutes of asking me if I was sure she wasn't going to hurt anybody, if I was sure that nobody else could hurt her, if I was sure that she could take her mask off inside with 3 other grown-ups.
So are educators equipped, are the schools equipped to even answer those questions? Because they might not be thinking that 4, 5, 6-year-olds are going to ask those questions, but I don't think your daughter's the only one who may ask that question, especially if families have taken the time, which I believe most have. Like, kids are asking, why do I have to wear this mask?
Right.
So you don't hurt someone, and so no one hurts you. So now if we've told them this, when they ask these questions in school, do we have responses for them? Do we have social emotional curriculum prepared specifically around pandemics, COVID-19, to address their needs?
Yep. And what does it look like when things ease up? We have a next door neighbor who's also kindergarten age, who's with us all the time. That's the one kid Maisie plays with now. And I don't think her parents talk to her very much about this. So she's really confused, and says things like, nobody's sick in your house, nobody's sick in my house. I think it's okay if we, whatever, all sorts of things. She has all sorts of fun ideas. And so there's this like teachers are not equipped to even navigate when kids are arguing about Santa Claus. How are teachers going to suddenly become equipped for this?
My biggest thing, and this I think about, like with their phones, when there's this big push, remember like some years ago about the phones, like the kids' phones, what's the city going to do about the phones? And I was very adamant, like, I'm not taking anybody's phone. I don't want to get into combative situations with my students. That's not, there's classroom management, but I know my scope and
Yeah.
how far that scope goes. And so thinking the same thing with the masks. So
Yeah.
what happens when a child doesn't want to wear their mask or cannot wear the mask anymore? Feels like I can't take it anymore, miss. I can't breathe right now. I need to take it off. And group dynamics is very real. It's part of the reason I try to stay in because it's even hard for me as an adult. If I'm in an environment where everyone's taking off masks, it becomes difficult to, you know, be that Daniel to dare to stand up and, do the right thing. It's not as easy as people might make it out to be.
Nope.
So how does that work when a child does that? A student, like, what recourse do I have to be fair to them, to look out literally for the lives of the other student, for myself? There are a lot of moving pieces, and I know we can't answer everything, Rachel,
Yep.
but there does need to be more thought put into this before we just like, hey, welcome back.
Right. There's a lot of messaging about like, we're so excited for school to start again. Like, no, nobody's so excited. Frankly, even the most, I was saying this to you earlier, there's so many parents I've spoken to who've said, I'm sending my kid back because I trust the schools. Even they are doing it with trepidation. And like, well, and it's probably clear if you're listening to me talk and you're not Vivett, like my family is not the quickest to just trust the system and knows better than to just trust the system. But the system is not prepared. And what I really think this sheds a light on, and that has me having mixed feelings about our decision, frankly, is that we as a society are not taking care of our communities. Like, we do not know how to live in community and care for one another. And so everybody looks out for their own and only their own.
And to take care of our most vulnerable, our children and our elderly. Once a man, twice a child is an old adage I grew up hearing. And children cannot advocate for themselves. They are like, they're not. Who listens to like little kids who put, oh, be quiet, go sit down. Our elderly the same way. They've given us the best years of their lives. They've lived out their lives, and now they are in vulnerable positions, often needing those very family members that they raised to take care of them. So why are we not taking care of them? Why aren't we placing a higher value on human life? Why are we placing more value on money than on life? Because that's
what this
what
is.
it's boiling down to.
That is absolutely what this is. The priority is people going back to work. And people need to go back to work because our society cannot take care of people.
Well, then that leads me to ask, well, what does a citizenship really garner me? And what are the benefits of being a citizen of a nation when my own care, which you are responsible for as a citizen, that's not your top priority? So then what are those benefits then? And I was very concerned, like, now teachers are considered essential workers. But what is the impetus behind that? It's everything has to be like with this side eye, with this like, oh, well, what are you really doing? That's a very uneasy way to live. Why can't there be a measure of trust? And not that there ever has been, so I'm not naive. I'm not saying like, oh, we ever had it and now it's gone, but it's becoming more and more apparent, like, well, this is a major problem. Look at what's happening. Look how many people died.
Right. And look at every school across the country is every school that is opening. How long is the school staying open for? I haven't seen any stay open for more than 2 weeks. I guess it's not been that long, but no one's staying open. They can't stay open.
No. Well, they opened also when they still had high rates of COVID, and they didn't take that into account. In New York, we are in a good position in that way. Like, we're the state that the rest of the states are watching because we've done this fairly well.
Yeah.
But we don't, that being said, then we need to make sure we continue on that track, And I do hear parents, and I appreciate you saying, Rachel, like, you know, you recognize the privilege that you have to be able to make the decisions that you and your husband are making for your family. I do think quite seriously about if parents for whom they have to send their kid to school because school is the child care that they need in order to work and provide a roof over their heads.
And is access to food, and is right, like our schools do much more than school, for better or worse,
Yep.
right? Like I don't know that that's right. I don't really think that families should have to rely on school for those things. I
Mhm.
think that's like another mark of brokenness in our society. But it's the facts, and we see it. We see the impact for those kids. Um, Schools are not motivated to like support families like mine. Um, so the question that we're going back to our local principal with is, can you put us in touch with the other families who have opted for virtual learning or homeschooling? Because I would love nothing more than to invite two of those families to join us who can't teach, right? Um, like we can rotate this through the three families who have more flexibility and include another two kids in there, and just pull them out of the school so it's safer for them. But because our kids are only entering kindergarten, we don't know all the families in our neighborhood in that way. And what impetus does a principal have to connect us with anybody? None.
None.
It doesn't put money back in his
Full
pocket.
agenda, like they have, you know,
Yep.
they want kids in school. And we also know that bodies in school equal funding.
That's right.
When attendance is very much tied to how much money a school gets,
Yes.
this race for the top, and all of these funded programs, they're manipulative.
Yep.
And that is what's behind it, that schools need kids in the school. Children that have special needs get more money in the school. And so they're needed in the school. Budgets are decimated.
Yeah.
You know, there is no money. People are being laid off.
Yep.
And then again, I look to, well, what resources do communities have to support them during this time? Because whatever support the government was giving, it's essentially gone. The moratorium has ended. So now people are going to be backed up with mortgages and rents and all other manner of financial burdens now that they have to take on. Unemployment, right? That extra 600, that ended.
Yep.
So I just don't know where the help is coming from. You said your organization has been giving out food. I didn't even know that. When
Yeah.
did that start?
So we're giving out everything except food, actually. So in normal times, like first off, I would say in Central Brooklyn, the numbers are that there's been a 1,000% increase in clientele in food pantries. And I think that is
What, 1,000% increase?
1,000%. So
Can you tell me what neighborhoods make up Central Brooklyn for those who might not know?
yeah, so we're talking Crown Heights, Bedford Stuyvesant, Brownsville, Bushwick,
East,
um,
East New York included?
New York, Flatbush, that area. I'm sure I missed yeah,
Okay.
that area.
And these are populated, for viewers who don't know, these are all Black and brown communities almost exclusively, except where gentrification has made it so that there are more white people living there. For the most part, those neighborhoods are impoverished.
Yep. I mean, a lot of those are gentrifying neighborhoods. And I would also add in there, one of those neighborhoods in the neighborhood I know best is Crown Heights, where there's a large Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox Jewish population, which is also quite poor,
Yes.
quite low income.
Mm-hmm.
Those neighborhoods have seen an overall increase by 1,000%. So like it's impossible to really understand this unless I put it in these numbers. For a pantry that would typically see 50 people a week, they're seeing 500 people a week.
Are they getting 450 more you know, packages of food and supplies and stuff? Have the supplies been coming in?
Now they are. In April, they weren't. In April, there was truly, in April, there was talk about famine in central Brooklyn because they could not get food fast enough. That's stopped. Food is coming into the city with like great speed now, I would say. What has happened though is that all of these food pantries, some of which are quite small, cannot do things like provide diapers and other necessary supplies to families in need because they're trying to work so fast to keep up with the food demands. So typically my organization, not all, but what my organization does is get volunteers and do learning with those volunteers about why they're serving, how they're serving, who they're serving. Okay. Because what we know is that volunteering can be really problematic, and volunteering is really essential, especially in times like these where volunteers are needed. Like those pantries would not function without volunteers right now. But what's the most problematic is when volunteers show up, think they saved the day, and don't have any context for what they're doing. So we both provide volunteers and provide the learning to wrap around their experiences. We have long relationships with lots of food pantries and other spaces. And I came back from maternity leave on March 15th. That's also relevant to name in the midst of all this.
Yes.
And my first 3 weeks back on the job, every single day I was on the phone with a different director of a pantry saying, like, we're heartbroken because mom of 6 kids, mom of 2 kids, dad of 3 kids, whatever, is asking for diapers, looking for toilet paper, looking for cleaning products, and we can't do it. Can you help? So not so long story short, we opened up our office space as a distribution site for all of those things.
And do you have those things? Have you gotten supplies of diapers and milk? And you know, it's food, but after the baby eats, the baby goes to the bathroom, and now what are they going to do?
Yep. We have gotten supplies, but can always use more supplies.
Before we end the broadcast tonight, can you share your organization, how people can send things to you? Yeah, please. Thank you.
Yeah. What else was I going to, so that's the, like, related here, what we haven't talked about so much that's also on my mind is Wi-Fi.
Whew.
Right?
Huge. So those neighborhoods don't have Wi-Fi?
No, and even my office space has horrific Wi-Fi. And like, I'm in office space. I'm not like living, I don't live in Crown Heights.
Right.
But so the impact there is massive when we're looking at this model that the city schools are planning on, and we'll see what happens if teachers even will go to work. But if kids are in school 1, 2, 3 days a week, the rest of their week, they're relying on Wi-Fi. And for all the talk that the mayor can do for all of that, kids do not have functioning Wi-Fi. And so one thing that's on my mind and that I've encouraged parents to talk about with their teachers is what happens if your kid misses class because they can't get online? How many times can that happen before you have a truancy case open?
And if we're talking going remotely, then we have to make sure that everyone has Wi-Fi, because it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that's how a lot of parents are feeling in this time. If I send my child to school, they'll get an education, but I'm risking their lives and the lives of others. If I keep them home and keep them safe in a way I feel is safe, then I can be jeopardizing them academically, because they don't, not only just academically, but we rely on Wi-Fi. Let's just be real. Like, let's stop acting like it's optional. What happened? The Wi-Fi was off for me the other day. I was like, oh, I got up and went to Panera. Like, oh, I gotta go because I need Wi-Fi. And Panera was like everyone's office space. Again, look at my privilege though, that I'm able to get up, hop in my car, go to Panera, spend $30 because you gotta eat while you're there. But you know, I could do that. People don't have it like that.
And certainly not every day.
No, that was one day, and as soon as it came back on, John was like, "Oh, it's on. Come back home." I'm like, "Thank God, I can't spend another dime. I'm tapped out. Like, how much more can I eat from Panera today?" You know. But that again, it's one day. What if that becomes the norm? Are McDonald's going to open up to let kids sit in there? I know some districts have talked about having buses,
Yep.
like Wi-Fi buses. You've heard about that, and
Yep.
having like essential have the bus essentially be like the router for that area. But I haven't heard much talk about that.
There's nothing in place for it. I know they did that in California,
Mm-hmm.
right? So because in other places they're planning around rural or like much more suburban societies where the expectation is that Wi-Fi won't work well. There's a reason that Wi-Fi doesn't work well in Central Crown Heights, and it is not because you can't get it there.
Okay, thank you.
Right? Like it's not the same as all the way out in rural California where of course it's an issue. That's not the same thing that we're talking about here.
It's not because the towers are down or they didn't, there's no FiOS system underground. That's not what it is. It's there,
Yes.
just not accessible to everyone. It's inequitably distributed.
Yep. Yep.
So who do we go to for that? Like that's the thing. Like who do we protest? How do we get? I know Spectrum was offering free Wi-Fi in the earlier part of the pandemic when this first happened,
Yep.
but I don't think that's the case anymore.
I don't know, and I know that anyone who had an outstanding bill at any point with
Okay.
Spectrum could never access it.
Oh, so that's a lot of people.
So if you had an outstanding bill and then canceled your Wi-Fi 2 years ago, and now suddenly the city says just log on to Spectrum,
Can't you
sorry,
have to
no.
pay that bill first before? Okay. And if anyone's ever not had enough money, like I have lived before with my children, one of the first things to go is that cable. If there's a bill that's not going to get paid, it's the cable bill. You'll be fine. You can do without it.
Right,
I lived for a year without cable with my kids because I was like, I can't. It's just too much. That bill was like almost 200 a month. I can't do it.
right, of
And
course.
they make it because of these packages. They make it so expensive that you might say like, listen, I'll just get the Wi-Fi, thinking it'll just be I don't know $40 or $50 a month. That's much different than the cable and the phone and everything. No, it ends up being
As
so
a,
high. Like they force you.
yep,
I remember at one point I was like, I don't need a house phone. I don't think I need it. Like we don't use it. Like, can you take it off? They're like, well, if you come out of the package, it would be more.
right,
So I'm like, this is a setup.
right. So you're just, yeah, we've been paying for a house phone. We're
Yeah,
married 10 years. We've been paying for a house phone for 10 years that we've never had.
I don't know your household number. I've never called you on it. I don't.
Because there's a box here that's not connected. But that's the way, that's just the reality, right? Like, I mean, it's not just the reality that the question you're asking of like, where do we go? There's so many, I wish I had an answer, right?
I'm asking like if anyone knows like how have other community states have you been successful in procuring adequate, that's the word too, like adequate, sufficient Wi-Fi that's not dropping every minute where the people on the call are not like blah, 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 or garbled up because that doesn't work either.
Right.
It's already a distant form of communication. Like we have to have that in place.
There's so many things that are not set right. Like, I don't understand how so many principals, superintendents, mayors, everybody think we're ready to go. I don't understand it.
No. And also, where's the plan if we do have to go totally remote?
Yes.
I can say that I am pleased with the way that my principal has handled this. I'm also at a new school, so that's kind of a lot of trepidation for me too because I will be teaching remotely. How am I going to build connections with students in this kind of way? It's easy to talk to you because I know you. We've gotten to know each other in person already. When you've already built that relationship, it makes it easier to talk online. But how am I going to develop that with them? But I am pleased just with the level of communication and how much detail has been put into mapping out a schedule and, keeping kids and thinking about every possible space in the building that we can use. And so that level of thoughtfulness is appreciated.
That's great.
You know,
But that's the minority of schools, unfortunately.
that's the minority of schools, absolutely. One of the questions, though, that still is like resonating within me is what happens when if we suddenly have to go to 100% remote.
Yep.
If something happens, as we saw happen in other school districts across the nation. I'm thinking of Georgia. I'm thinking, specifically Georgia, so I'm thinking about, because that case kind of went viral, right? When that student was just showing us pictures of what the hallway looked like and stuff like that. So what happens here? Because are students in Georgia that different from students in New York? Whether it's rural, upstate, downstate, middle? No, they're not that different.
Right.
When it comes to that, when it comes to socialization, and like that's a part of their growth and development. It's very natural for them to want to socialize. What are we going to do with that? And then what are we prepared to deal with completely remote instruction until we have a national plan?
Right.
Yeah, we need a national plan. I thought that was the role of the Secretary of Education, but apparently not. That's who I would expect to have instruction from. Instead, I've heard like, oh, well, only like 2% of kids might die. And that's all. I'm like, only? So there's a measurement of people who could die that's acceptable to you?
Right. That is the message, right? People have to die before anybody's willing to not even until, right? Like we watched people die. We're watching people die.
People die just because the media is not reporting it. Be ye not fooled, okay? COVID is real. People are still dying from it. People are still being hospitalized from it. And people still have the scars from who had it and are recuperating still. I was speaking with a girlfriend over the weekend who said she knows someone who had COVID-19 and she still can't breathe properly. She had it early March, like very early on. And she still has scar tissue in her lungs, and her doctor's telling her, you'll probably have that for the rest of your life. She's a young woman. To have scar tissue on your lungs for the rest of your life. So we don't know enough about what this virus does.
No.
And only time will tell. And how does it impact children? Because we've heard like so many, right? And things like kind of have been meandering all over the place with how first it didn't impact them, right? What else did they say? Like, how far have we gone? It didn't impact them.
It didn't impact them. Kids could get sick. Kids can get the most sick. Now it's up higher in their noses. So we haven't been taking the right swabs. They don't know. They don't know what they're doing.
They don't know. That's really what it is. And you know what? It's okay to say you don't know because it's new. I wish like that level of transparency would be said, like, we don't know and we're trying to figure this out. And as a nation, we need to come together. Feed me that spiel. I'm more apt to go for that because it sounds like humanistic to me. But this other stuff,
I said this last night. The countries in our world that are beating this are the countries who are having real talk and like not to just dive into the gender dynamics of this. The only countries that are at close to 0% nationwide are led by women.
Well, we had a chance. Really?
Really? Yeah. But we're led by like the opposite of that. And so ego gets in the way of plans, and that's what we're seeing over and over, like at every level.
At every level. I remember we were told, like, no, you don't have to wear masks. It's fine. Yeah. Remember that early on? I was like, but I saw some people wearing masks, and I started to pay attention. In certain communities, they were wearing masks. I'm like, oh, you know something that I don't know. Yep. I'm going to follow your lead.
Yeah.
So there's so much misinformation, I'm grateful for you coming and talking as the voice to us, as a voice of a parent who's really in the throes of this. It's great to hear from experts and people who know, but I think one of the things, not I think, I know one of the things I love about the National Parents Union and the time we spend on all of these shows is we've curated such a vast amount of real talk parent voice.
Yep.
What's going on in this, because at the end of the day, they're making decisions for their children.
Yep. Life
and death decisions. And that's, as a parent, like that, I'm grateful that my kids are in like the last one who's 21. And even for us, it was like, well, you're not going on, there's no campus, it's just hybrid. And it's like, yeah, but that means I can't take a math class because that's not my strong subject. Like I need the teacher in person for math,
right.
So it's like, okay, so what do we do with that? So you just have to take other classes, and are these going to fit into your major when it's time to graduate? So, but we just step day by day.
Right.
Step.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many sacrifices that go on in this. And of course there's sacrifices. Like that's the thing. And you've said it a few times, like I don't have the answer. I don't know exactly what should be going on, but I know this isn't it.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Please I know I'll be in touch with you and you'll let me know, like, ultimately how things are going. Can you tell us the name of your organization and how people interested in donating can get in contact with you?
Yeah. So the name of the organization is Repair the World. You can go to repair, abbreviated, RPR.world, WORLD/donations. That's the bit.ly.
Okay.
And I can post it on the Facebook. And if you're in Nassau County with a kid entering kindergarten and want to talk about what we're working on and want to join us, please get in touch with me.
Please. And she has her daughter is brilliant. I'm not just saying this in front of her because she knows she's brilliant. When you sent me the video of her reading, I'm like, I'm not surprised. I showed it to John. He's like, oh, I thought she was reading already. She speaks so well and is so engaging. So it's a wonderful family to work with, honestly. And if we've learned nothing else, we need to have community. Strong community is needed. Grassroots community efforts are needed, because looking for top-down leadership, it's not happening in the ways we need it to. It's not. Like, that's just the reality. It's not. And so we need to look out for each other. That's just that's my soapbox. I'm gonna get off it now because it's time to go. But thank you, Rachel, for being here. I love you so much.
I love you.
Thank you. We're here for you, not just John and I. Obviously, Speak Your Truth, the National Parents Union. We're here in any ways we can help. And please keep us posted once things get started. I might invite you to come back on and give us kind of like, okay, now we're in it. How's it going? An update. And again, parents, if you're in Nassau County, if you know about homeschooling, please reach out to us. We can get you in touch with Rachel. And she's looking for support. I know there are a lot of families who've been homeschooling for a while now, not because of the pandemic, and you have great insights and they're needed at this time. So please reach out to us and we'll connect you. And I thank you for being with us tonight. Just thank you all, and just trust that you're doing what's best. You kind of have to take a step back and breathe a little bit. And just like, because it can be overwhelming. It is overwhelming. Just do the best you can do for yourself, for your child, with the resources that you have. And if you need help, ask for it. So thank you. Give Stephen and the kids our love, okay?
I will.
Okay. Mwah. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you're out.
Thank you so much.